Hey, we're live, Stacy.
Okay, great. Hello, welcome everybody. It's great to see you all. This is our first improvement review for the College Career Civic Readiness NIC of 6 different deeper learning organizations. So we're really excited to have you here and help us kind of think through a question and a dilemma that one of our team is wrestling with. So we have Robert Kuhl and Judy Wu here to share their work around building belongingness with boys of color, specifically in 10th and 11th grades and beyond. So we are going to actually use a protocol that we use quite often in our schools, and I'm going to give a kind of quick overview of that protocol, and then we're going to turn it over to Robert and Judy. So, Ryan, can you pull up the slides?
They're up.
Okay, great. So how this works, the purpose of this protocol is basically to bring us all together. Each team is going to be presenting on a various month, sharing their work, but it's a time for us to share our work, but also to engage each other as kind of participants and unleash our collective wisdom around it. So there's going to be 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes of a presentation from Robert and Judy. And then there's going to be about 5 minutes for clarifying questions, and those are those questions that are really quick and easy, quick factual answers. More on those and examples soon. Then we'll have some time for probing questions, which is where we really get to push Robert and Judy's thinking around the question they're going to pose for us. And then we'll have 15 minutes where those of us in the room get to discuss their dilemma and kind of throw out ideas and especially celebrate what we see as strengths in the work and also ways that we think they could move the work forward, specifically related to the question that they're going to pose for us today. Then we'll have a little bit of time for them to come in and share their reflections on what they heard, and then some time to debrief for us as a group about this process and how did we feel like it went, how might we tweak it moving forward, because it's all about learning and doing and improving as we go. So we're going to be together for about the next hour, and we're really happy and excited to have all of you team leads here in the room with us to engage in the discussion. So we're going to turn it over to Robert and Judy then, and you guys have 5 to 10 minutes to take us into your dilemma and share with us your work.
Cool, thank you. So there's some notes in the slides as well on the points that we're going to go through. I'm going to take you through kind of a quick history of our work. So a couple years ago, there's an increase in LCFF funding, local control funding formula in California. And we were trying to figure out how to best use this money to serve our most at-risk populations. And we kind of threw all of our resources into grade 9 in this effort, Vision Zero, to let no 9th grader fail. We figured, you know, let's start there. And it was kind of messy, and we were able to learn a lot. There's a nice chart. I don't know if Brian can bring that up. There's a nice looking chart where you see a run chart on work completion by 9th graders and by gender over the weeks, and so we kind of tied this together with our PDSA cycles, looking at what interventions made the biggest difference in homework completion. But ultimately, what we found is that using planners was a great way to get kids to complete their work, knowing what work was due, and we learned that our efforts failed to change the number of kids that were failing 9th grade, and we learned that we had bitten off probably more than we could chew. So we moved ahead a semester, and we learned the power of pizza. Instead of targeting the entire 9th grade, we targeted our African American and Latino boys in 10th grade, specifically in math. Noticing a need there, we hired an hourly inclusion support coach to work directly with those students, and we met with them every couple of weeks to talk about belongingness and community and check in on how they feel about school. And what we found was by the end of the semester, 30% of those students had increased their math grade to the next high letter grade, and that compared with only 15% of the rest of the population who went up a grade and 15% who went down. So that got us to our current work. But I think a background is necessary. The current work, the goal is to increase the percentage of African American and Latino young men who enrolled in 4-year colleges after graduation. Currently, that's about 50 to 60%. And our target is to bring that to 70% for the current 11th graders when they went next year when they're in 12th grade. So we have a two-pronged approach to this, and I'm going to go over one of those prongs. And the aim of this is to build awareness of the college process and experience, and to build a supportive community. So our 11th graders have buddies. There's 2 or 3 kids in a group. They are responsible for owning each other's outcomes, checking in with one another regularly, going to office hours after school. Some of them do Skype hangouts. They have various ways that they check in with one another, but they're supposed to be responsible for one another. And then they're also supposed to be responsible for a group of 10th grade buddies as well. So we're doing the same kind of work with our 10th graders. The difference is they're getting some mentorship by the 11th graders. And then a really key thing that we launched recently is that our 11th graders are all connected with the San Diego State undergraduate, who is mostly Latino students, some non-Latino, but they're all first-gen students as well. In addition, we continue to meet every week with our 10th grade group and our 11th grade group, and we have an hourly inclusion support coach working with these students, kind of reminding them of what they've agreed to. We're tracking several behaviors, such as meeting attendance. About 90% of the 10th and 11th graders come to our meetings regularly every couple of weeks. About 90% check in with their same grade level buddies. Only about 35% of the 11th graders are checking with their 10th grade buddies. So that's something we want to work on. And almost all of the 11th graders have either met with or are planning to meet with their undergraduate mentors. The ultimate measure is how many students are on track to earn a Cal Grant, and to do so they have to have a 3.0 GPA. So that's our ultimate measure. Currently we're at about 50% with that, but we're confident that's going to increase by the end of the year. And one more thing on that, so our meetings, actually I'll come back to that. So here's prong 2, and Judy's going to take over.
For our second...
If you hit mute, we won't be able to hear the dog. You just hit mute up on the top of your screen there. No? Oh, okay.
So for our second prong of this two-prong approach, we really use this idea that rising tides lift all boats. And so building in the experiences that these students are having in their meetings into the classroom, I think, is something that could be really important. So our primary aim on this was having students build a conceptual understanding of math through collaboration and developing that sense of community and having that sense of belonging. Some of our change ideas here include shared experiences among the whole class in order to develop that class culture of collaboration and community. Assigned groups and a folder system. If you click on that link, you'll be able to open up and see what that folder system looks like, as well as group quizzes, where students are assessed partly on their content understanding, but partly how they interact as a group together. The measures for us, we had some process measures and some outcome measures. The process measures for us, the students reflect daily and then weekly in this folder system to see how they're doing according to standards that they've sort of set forth for themselves, goals they've set for themselves. And then there's a lot of accountability among the group members of, are they helping each other reach those goals? The individual reflection piece is another way for us to check in with our students and kind of see where they're at, and that is a portfolio that we have students doing about once every 2 months or so. Our ultimate measure for this is just to see what those semester and year-long grades look like for our students in math.
So that brings us to our focus questions, but a little bit of framing of the focus questions. So we're asking the question, what are we overlooking and what else should we be doing? And just to give you an example of some of the work we've done within with our bi-monthly meetings with the students, we've shown them short video clips, a piece by Freeman Rabowski talking about men of color in math and science at universities. We've used the backwards bicycle video, the Will Smith hard work video. We've used stats about college-going rate of African American and Latino men across the country. So we're definitely looking at like what other short video clips, handouts, resources, news articles might be inspiring and empowering to use with our students, and what else are we overlooking there? And the same question goes within the math classroom. What are we overlooking? And what resources would be worth sharing?
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Robert and Judy. Ryan, can we go back to the norms slide? Great. So we didn't have a chance to kind of touch on these quick norms before we move on with the rest of the protocol, which is we're going to move shortly into clarifying questions. And one of the things that we're going to try to do throughout this conversation is to be hard on the content, soft on the people. We want to kind of celebrate Robert and Judy's work and also push it. And one way of doing that is to be as kind, helpful, and most importantly specific as we can. So if something strikes us or if we have a question, please frame it in a very specific way. Part of the value of this protocol is kind of enlisting all the voices in the room because Robert and Judy have a meaty question that they want our feedback on, and we'd love to hear from everybody who's here in this room because you all have a lot of expertise around this. So doing our best to share the air or step up, step back so that all voices are able to contribute would be great. And just so everybody knows, moving forward, especially online doing these, facilitation and kind of conversation is always a little wonky and tricky to get going sometimes, so I'm going to do my best to be an active facilitator. So do not be alarmed if I call out particular people. If you haven't spoken for a while, I might just say, hey, Gabby, what do you think about this? So just know that I'm going to be doing my best to kind of bring the conversation forward. All right, thanks, Ryan. So go ahead and go back to the clarifying questions slide. So Robert and Judy have posed a couple focus questions for us, one around what are we missing, what are we overlooking, and then what about resources that we could be using to better achieve our aim or kind of keep movement on this aim. So we'd love to have those of you in the room kind of pose any clarifying questions that you have that would help you better understand Robert and Judy's work or their dilemma. And these are brief, factual questions where Robert and Judy shouldn't even have to pause in order to answer them. So an example is like, how many students did you try this change idea with? When did you collect this data? So let's just take 30 seconds or so and try to think of some clarifying questions. And when they come to you, go ahead and please just chat them right into the window on the right, and we'll just kind of walk through as we go. So I'll call on particular people, and then we'd love to have you actually pose your question to Robert or Judy. So as they come, go ahead and just type them in.
And for those who are watching online, if you'd like to use the Q&A function, I'll go ahead and address those questions if they come up. So feel free to pose any as well for those of you who are watching right now.
It's just like a classroom, awkward pauses, waiting for the question. Yay, Scott! Okay, great. Scott, go ahead and unmute yourself, and if you would, pose your question. That would be great.
As you were talking about materials you used, did you find TED Talks that connected to your goal?
The only one we used actually two. We used a piece of a Chris Emden talk and a piece of a talk by Freeman Rabowski. So if you think of others that would be useful, we're in the discussion. We'd love to hear more about those.
Great. Gabby, you're up.
I was wondering how students were matched with their cross-grade level buddy or mentors, and also was it the same for the cross-grade level as it was for the San Diego State students?
Great question. So the cross-grade level is there's about 20 to 25 boys in each grade level, and we had kind of a speed dating lunch, and the 11th graders kind of chose their 10th graders, if you will. So we matched them up that way. The San Diego State mentors filled out a questionnaire, and then our 11th graders looked at those questionnaires and tried to pick the person they thought they would best match up with, and that's how we did that.
Great. And Michael?
I was wondering which of those interventions, the same grade buddies, cross-grade buddies, the undergrad mentor, etc., came from the learning that occurred in the previous cycle, where you moved people from the 50, 60% up to 70% on the grades?
So the cycle we did last year was just one grade level, it was just grade 10. And one thing that they realized is they were starting to build this natural organic community anyway, and they wanted to make sure to include everyone and more people. And so they said, hey, let's start doing this work with grade 10 as well. So at the beginning of the year, they came up with a bunch of ideas that they could do in order to make their work more powerful for them, and then also to bring this work to other people. And the two things they wanted were to have this buddy system within the grade level, and then I threw out the idea of connecting with undergrads, and they liked that as well. So it kind of grew out of what had worked and what they thought would work if we did it more formally.
Great, and we have a question from Rob Reardon, our very own President Emeritus. I didn't say that word right, but can you clarify what you mean by the gap between experiences and content?
Did that.
I think what I meant by that is oftentimes the sort of culture building activities at the beginning of the year are sort of, you know, one-off activities. You do them and like they're fun in the moment, and then you get into the math, and then you just do the math. And so it was really about trying to be really explicit with the students that yes, these activities that we're doing, for example, one of them was we did something like this, and we split the kids in half and had half of them in a room where we said, some people can genetically do this and some people can't, so if you can't, that's okay. And then the other half of the kids, we told them everyone can do this. And the feel in the rooms was so different, but it was a great exercise for us to kind of bring into the classroom of, so when you're working with each other around math, do you actually believe, like, genetically you can't do this as well as someone else? And how does that play out in your experience versus if we have a culture where we know that everyone can do the math, how does that actually play out? I think that's what I meant by the gap between experiences and content.
Great. And for those of you who couldn't see Judy doing this, this was the tongue curling thing. So Ben has a question. Ben, do you want to pose your question?
Yeah, I think maybe because I know the prong one work already, I followed all of that. The prong two thing, I'm sorry, Judy, can you just like maybe summarize again for me? I didn't totally follow the whole. I was kind of also distracted by thinking about where the folder was or something, so
okay.
Just try it again for me.
So, yes. I think, so one concrete thing that we've tried to do is this idea of having a buddy that they were accountable to was an idea that I wanted to try in the classroom as a whole. So in the past, I've had students sit in groups together, but it was like, well, you're kind of sitting together, but what are you actually doing together? Where is the impetus for really having to work together? And so for those of you who are able to view it, the students get this folder. There's only one folder per group, and at the beginning of the week, each student writes their name there, and they set a math goal for the week. And so what I found is that by doing, just writing down the goals, it didn't really have an impact. It's still sort of in a next informal PDSA cycle. What we did was they created a goal, but then they actually had to share it with one other person in their group. So they had to know, they are responsible for one other person's goal, and how are they going to help that person achieve the goal too? And so bringing in this piece of being accountable to someone else, not only in them knowing your goals, but you knowing theirs and helping them work towards that. And then so that was a way for us to bring in like the group work norms that they had generated as a group or as a class in the beginning of the year.
Great, thank you. So that's a perfect transition. We're going to move into probing questions. And these are questions that now that we've kind of gotten a sense of Robert and Judy's context and the work that they've been doing, these are really questions that we can ask to dig a little deeper. So the goal is really to help deepen the presenters' thinking around the issue. One caution is to try to avoid advice in disguise. So these are questions that are like, have you thought about, or that start with, in my classroom, or in my experience. If it feels like a suggestion, then save it for the next portion, because there will be plenty of time for suggestions and ideas. But some great probing questions are, for example, what's your hunch about this? What challenges do you anticipate? And we're actually going to kick it off with one that has come from the G+ community watching online. Sean, who's a High Tech High GSE alum, now school leader, yay, hi Sean, who wants to know, are you integrating what you learned about Project Zero and the 10th grade program into this year's 9th and 10th graders? If so, have you seen improvement?
I'd say yes. The biggest thing we learned from Vision Zero and the 9th grade was that we bit off way too much. And because of that, ultimately, it didn't succeed. And so we've been taking a very incremental approach school-wide to doing this work, starting with 8th grade level, moving to 2 grade levels, and next year moving to all 4 grade levels. So we definitely learned to take things a little bit more slowly and to be patient. And have we seen an improvement? Whereas our 11th graders that have been doing this work, they're in their 2nd semester of this work, they check in with one another all the time, sometimes daily, at least once a week. And our 10th graders haven't, they're not quite there yet, but I'm confident they'll get there, because it took our 11th graders more than a quarter to get there, and our 10th graders only a quarter into this work.
Great. So if anybody else has probing questions, feel free to chat them in, and we will call on you. Yes, and Michael, we will go back to the focusing questions really briefly. There they are. What are we overlooking? What else should we be thinking about or doing? Other resources? Scott, go ahead and pose your question.
Do you find it as helping students more on an academic level or more on a motivational level, and why do you think that?
Do you want to take that?
I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. I find that the 11th graders I'm working with this year are more open to accessing resources, and so they know that it's important that they build that community. And so if they are, getting a grade that they know, I have this Cal grant, this is my goal. So if this grade is not meeting that, that's sort of the extra motivation. But I think that content is coming along for the ride, for sure. They're building really strong academic skills.
It's interesting. So yesterday after school, I saw one of our students in the hall. I said, hey, you didn't check in with me when we're doing check-ins on your Cal grant progress. He said, I know I'm not on track. I said, let's take a look at it. So we sat down and looked at it, and I said, what's this C in math? He's like, yeah, I don't know. I clicked on his grades, and it says, well, it looks like you have a redo that's due today. Where are you going right now? I'm going home. I was like, no, you're not. You're going to office hours. He went to office hours and worked on it. So I think there's definitely, they're mixed, the motivation and the academic piece. I think real academic growth is always preceded by strong relationships, and I think that the strong relationships are resulting in content growth, if you will.
Great. Michael, go ahead and pose your question.
I was wondering if there was something nagging at you or bugging you that makes you think that you are overlooking something.
I feel like there's always stuff to improve on. There's always something, fresh ideas that you're like, oh, I just didn't even think about that. Sometimes when you're and especially for me this year being, in a classroom, I think I just worry that there are other things that I'm potentially missing.
And the same thing, like last year, I remember I had read an article by, I can't remember his name right now, and basically he found that students were 15 times more motivated. I have no idea what measure he used, I don't remember. 15 times more motivated academically when they knew that their teachers knew the students' hopes and dreams. So I said, wow, how powerful is that? So just that stat, and that little excerpt from a study, I took that to the students, and it turned into a very powerful couple of weeks. And so that kind of stuff is like, if we're aware of any of that kind of stuff, it would be super useful for us.
Great. And Ben, your question.
If I remember the data correctly, it looked like you said I think only 35% of the cross-buddy collaborations were happening.
Yep.
And I was wondering what ideas you already have about what to do about that.
There was some resistance from the 10th graders. I just checked in with the 11th graders on Tuesday, and like, yeah, some of them just don't want to hang out. And I said, I'm going to give you the same advice that I gave your undergraduate buddies at San Diego State. Don't give advice. Just get to know them. Just build that relationship. So you would probably notice if you met with your undergraduate buddies, they're probably not telling you like what to do. They're probably asking you a lot of questions about who you are and what your dreams are. Do that same kind of thing with the 10th graders and let's see where it gets us. And I think it's just going to take some time, but I think there was a feeling of kind of relief with some of the 11th graders going, oh yeah, I can actually do that. And others feeling relief because they've been trying to give advice and kind of failing. So I'm kind of putting it on them rather than on the 10th graders to be open to it, with the 10th graders focusing on at least building that strong community within their grade level. And then being open later to getting to know others. And so I'm hopeful that just given that kind of new direction, the 11th graders will get there with the 10th graders.
Great.
Nick. Don't try something else.
Nick, you're up. Oh, I think you're muted, Nick. Go ahead and click on the microphone icon at the top in the center.
We can see his question.
Yeah, that's true. We just don't get to hear his beautiful voice. But
I'll read his question. How are students experiencing the push for more student-student collaboration? Why does it matter to them? Do you want to take that about the math class?
Yeah, I think sort of why does it matter? I think it's not enough as teachers to help students be successful in our class. It's important that we're preparing them for our class and beyond. And that's definitely an indicator of, future success is, can you collaborate with someone? Do you have that community that you can turn to? And so that's sort of, in our question of are there other resources that we could share, I think we can tell them that, but how can we really help them experience that? As far as how they're experiencing the push, I mean, it's November. November is definitely different than August, but June will be way different than November. So, they're getting there. I think they're buying in. But we still hear a lot of talk of like, well, but, I'm good at math, and sometimes other people slow me down. And that's sort of just like the kind of talk that I love to eliminate from the classroom entirely.
Great. And so let's have... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Robert.
I was just going to say it's interesting because you see that in the math classroom. We don't really see it in our boys group, if you will, where you see really strong students academically who are there and they want to help uplift the entire community. And some of that's just who they are. I think some of that has to do with the way we kind of sold this work to them and the importance of this. But it's interesting when you go into a more integrated community, the math classroom, where there's all kinds of kids in there, it's a little harder to sell it. So far, we'll get there.
Good. So we've got a slew of questions. We're going to try to take 3 questions in quick succession, and I'm going to adjust the time on the discussion because these are really good. Scott, do you want to pose yours really quickly?
Okay. So. You mentioned in the last piece about like really getting into the hopes and the aspirations of the students as teachers, and so like what are all the things you're doing to do that, and is there anything else you were thinking about doing that maybe you haven't implemented yet?
One thing I challenge the students to do, I'm 16 years old, so whose responsibility is it that your teachers know your hopes and dreams, that yours or theirs? And they had a really interesting conversation about that. I said, remember, ultimately, it benefits you. And they came up with some kind of 50-50. I said, well, what about in 2 years when you're an undergraduate? Whose responsibility is it then? They're like, well, then it's ours. I said, so how do we make that transition? If your teachers aren't asking you, how do you share? And so that was really interesting. And then just within the group, having kind of a group hope, group aspiration. We always start off with, why are we here? And they're like, because we're all going to college. It's like, that's right. That's our collective hope and aspiration. Now, what are we working at? What are we working on well, and that's working well? That's going to get us there. So that's been beneficial.
Great. And we have a quick question from Rob in the G+ of saying he's struck by the emphasis on math grades. What other elements of mindset or development are entering into conversations about student growth?
It started with math grades because that's where there was an acute need. And really the work, and Judy's obviously doing work in math and on collaboration, and then the work we're doing collectively outside of that is on all academics. We focused on, initially we weren't sure what our focus was going to be it growth mindset or self-efficacy, and quickly through a lot of conversations with the students we found that leveraging and building a sense of academic belonging and building a community would bring the most benefit, at least the kids thought it would. And so we've really been focusing on that. And we've done some work on growth mindset. We've done some work in self-efficacy. We've done some work on learning and unlearning. So there's been a lot of different pathways we've taken, and it's more or less been student-directed. But the focus has definitely been on academic belonging because we saw that was the area the area of greatest need.
Great. And one final 30-second question from Jen. Have you taken on the question of equity within groups and collaborations in terms of with each other and the students?
Yes. Yes, I think, you know, this idea of being really thoughtful about what group work looks like and helping students unpack what that looks like. That, you know, a lot of times students say, well, you know, I ended up doing all of the work and so did no work, and then the question becomes, did you invite that person into that conversation? Mm-hmm. And so I think having students really become empathetic about each other as learners is definitely another piece of this whole puzzle.
Great. Okay, awesome. So we are going to move into the discussion phase then, and this is actually the time where Robert and Judy get to step back and take notes on whatever they hear. We're going to talk about their work like they're not even listening, except we're going to be very kind and helpful and specific and all of that. But we're actually going to start with warm feedback. So we've got about 12 to 15 minutes here to have a conversation trying to push the work forward. But let's start with, what do we want to celebrate? What strengths do we see that we're excited about? And we're also knowing that there's a lot of us in this room right now. We're going to post a link in the chat box to a note sheet. So if there's anything that you want to say or you want Robert and Judy to hear that maybe doesn't make it into the chat, please, or resources that you want to share, please just click on the link in the chat box and you can add anything there. That would be much appreciated. So who wants to kick us off with some warm feedback? And feel free to just enter into the conversation.
This is Michael. I definitely feel like it was a learning journey going from the former initiative with the pizza slide to building on what the young people wanted in terms of the mentorship and how this community built naturally out of that.
And feel free to chat things in too, and I can call folks out. Or as Ryan said, you can just write hand in the chat, and then I'll know that you have something to say, if that feels a little easier.
Well, I'll throw in another one. I'm a little, in fact, I'm a little intimidated by it, and that is how detailed this newest initiative is with all the different levels of mentorship and the folder system. And I've got to get to work. I'm very impressed. And I love the principle behind it all, is that the rising tide raises all boats.
Great. So I'm actually going to exercise my active facilitation right at this point, and I'm going to ask Gabby or Jen to share a thought that's percolating up for them or something that they want to celebrate.
Well, I think it's great that students are actually utilizing the undergraduate mentors. We have sort of similar program here when it comes to like SAT college prep, and not all of the students would be as excited to reach out to them, and we have, I think, a little bit more structure around it, and it's not on their own time. It's not something that they can sort of opt into, so it's great to see that there's 100% participation for that.
Cool. Great. And Ben, I'm going to call on you since I know you're very familiar with the work.
Well, I mean, I just think it's, get goosebumps when I hear about the work. Honestly, I just think that I love everything about it. I appreciate I think if I understand the prong 1 and prong 2, there's kind of this thing that's happening generally outside of the classroom, and then there's something that's happening specifically inside the classroom, and I appreciate that kind of framing of that sort of both pieces are important. And I just think, you know, I'm in the work that we've been doing recently, we being Ryan and Stacy and me, this belongingness piece has really come up. And then I was just at this Rakes meeting on Monday and Tuesday of this week where David Yeager told me that belongingness is the most important thing to work on, and I just put a link to this paper in the Google Doc about that. So I just think there's something that's really there that these guys are focused in on that strikes me as very important.
Great. And Jen shared her appreciation in the chat box of appreciating the focus on student voice, collaboration, and mentorship. Scott, was that you saying, like, call on me, call on me? All right, please.
Yeah, and this kind of goes for, it's warm feedback, but at the same time, it goes into possible future moves, which is a lot of these kids are going to look back on this and see how important this mentoring was, like, to their future as they're looking on. And so it might not be a half bad idea as well to convince some of those students to come back later on to be mentors on top of the mentee. So you can almost get like a kind of an interactive system going, you know, which you really feel the benefit.
Great. So I think that is a perfect point to start transitioning into what are we wondering, what suggestions do we have, and Ryan, could we have you put up the focus question slides again so we can make sure that we're keeping our conversation kind of targeted and helpful to Robert and Judy? I think we see you, not the slides.
I'll have it open 1 second, just checking.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody want to get us started with a suggestion? And the questions, I remember them, were basically, what are we overlooking? And are there some resources that we should be using? And again, feel free to just jump in or type hand in the chat box, and I'll know to call on you.
I just want to quickly add, too, if you have access to the G+ Google Doc, I'll happily read any of those suggestions as well, anybody in the audience.
Great.
And the slides are up now.
Scott, go ahead and tell us a little bit about why you think David Conley's work.
He focuses a lot on, we talk about college and career readiness, and the fact that he's really kind of said these are like the 42 points that really help get you ready. And so if some of the mentors, mentees are also kind of looking at those things while they're working towards achieving their math grades and everything, it can kind of lend itself into lots of maybe other avenues. And so sometimes you just hear the term college and career and it's so ambiguous. This would really help define it for some kids who really don't know what it means. So it wouldn't be a bad resource to think about.
Great. Other ideas, resources, even questions that are coming up?
The day after we all convened at High Tech High, I got to go up to LA the next day, and I visited Augustus Hawkins High School that has a program inside of it called RISE. I forget what it stands for, but Indigenous is the I in there.
Yeah, cool.
And I witnessed an hour-long training by a fellow named Derek Canty, who's coaching 30 students of color on becoming mentors. And it was so powerful and really working on addressing their mindset, and he even enlarged it to focus on whatever tool he was teaching them to apply it to their lives. So he had folks getting up talking about their parents and their relationships with their family and how to use these tools to talk to them. So that's just something I put the links to the school, to Derek Canty, and the nonprofit that I was working with. It's called Powerful Public Schools, something like that. I put that link and a contact person there in the notes.
Great. Ben's got something, and then I'm going to call on Steve. Ready or not?
Well, what Michael just said was making me think about in our sort of theory of action, we've elevated sort of engaging families, and so that just made me. I think just building on what Michael said, I wonder how is there a prong 3, or it's part of prong 1 perhaps, or you know, getting so you have like this interesting thing of like San Diego State mentors, 11th graders, 10th graders. I wonder where if parents of some of those students are. I mean, is there a weekend event that includes some parents, and maybe it's held, you know, at school, or maybe it's held somewhere else that would work better for families. I was just thinking about that issue.
Great. And Steve, did you have anything you were thinking about?
Unmute, Steve.
Maybe while Steve's figuring out, there was a chat, I think, from the Google Plus community around just family, piggybacking on Ben's comment, kind of how else could we be engaging family. And I'm also just wondering about the 35% cross-buddy. I know part of the goal was to establish a peer-to-peer kind of mentoring and have that be really strong between the 10th and 11th grades. So it'd be interesting if anybody has had kind of success in their own organizations or heard of places where that cross-grade mentoring is happening really well.
We have a mentoring system at Eagle Rock, so that's another reference I can share.
Great. Do you want to share a little bit about it now, or what do you think makes it distinctive and work well?
I don't know enough about it, but I know the people who run it. But we have heterogeneous incoming classes, and we're ungraded. So by its very nature, it's across different in traditional schools grades. It's our more veteran students working with the newer students that come in. And they create family trees. So you have one mentor, but you're also part of a larger family tree within the school. But I'll get you the contact folks who know that program more in detail here.
Great. And we've got a chat from Jennifer, who doesn't have her mic working right now, but Rachel Lotan's work with complex instruction and status interventions, especially in math, could be helpful, as well as Elizabeth Cohen's work around status could be great. Was there somebody else that was trying to jump in when Michael got started?
We have some from our G+ community. Also, Rob also had some comments if you want to read that question. And we have one from Laura McBain, which will be upcoming too as well.
Great. So Rob wrote, thinking about the way math is such a powerful lens for understanding the world, our own immediate world, and the world beyond, I wonder how this sense of the power and potential of math is being developed or might be further developed in the program. So it sounds like building the belongingness, but also kind of shifting students' perceptions of math. This could be a real opportunity for that. And wondering how we might connect with other mentoring programs. For example, there's a school in Chicago that uses young men's mentoring programs every week. That's from Laura. Great. Steve, are you ready and unmuted?
Yep. I'm unmuted now, I believe.
Great.
I'm thinking about peer influence, and it's obvious, though the term hasn't been used, that it's obvious to me anyway. I'm inferring that part of the power of what's happened so far is the peer-to-peer influence within the classroom. But I'm thinking, given the fact that high-tech high students come from many different neighborhoods, I would assume that all of the students have other peer groups as well. That is, they have neighborhood peer groups. And I'm wondering whether any of them experience a conflict between their growing identity as potential college students when they're at high-tech high, and perhaps some conflict, some pushback from what they get from their friends and neighbors at home, and whether there's any need to address some of that. That is, the sense that if they go away to college, they're going to be abandoning some of the people who are nearest and dearest to them, and whether they might need some reinforcement to to, cope with that sense.
Great. We have Nick, who's not sure if his mic is working yet or not, so I'll read Nick's comment. He's wondering how you can build more authentic meaning around mentoring and peer-to-peer conversation communication. Why does this matter to students beyond college? How can this help them right now? And another one from Sean in the G+, wondering if the mentoring could be integrated into the inclusion department as well, so that there are more students receiving the undergrad mentorship and thus more students using the collaboration relationship model. So kind of integrating it into more places across the school. And if there's any reactions to any of this that's been shared. So if anybody's kind of jiving around a particular idea or wondering about it, that'd be great as well.
Well, honestly, I think it's hard to participate in this conversation because it's like Michael, it's a little bit overwhelming. I feel a little overwhelmed by how much they're already doing. So what are we missing? I'm like, well, you've been thinking about this a lot harder than I have, so I don't have much to contribute in a way. So that does raise questions about what's the most helpful question, etc. But I don't know. That's just the reaction I'm having about kind of trying to engage in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Also, to Ben's point there, not seeing everything and how it looks. We're just kind of throwing ideas against the wall and see what sticks. And we feel free to make suggestions that they would discard. So, in the spirit of that, here's a suggestion you can discard. If they're also thinking about like various colleges, things that they might want to go see, maybe reaching out to different freshmen at some schools across the nation, across the country, and set up video chats like this, and then get some like virtual mentors as well, and really start talking about like how important math is to various majors. So. I don't know if we just want to expand it. That might be a direction in which to expand it.
Great. Well, we have 1 minute left. So if there's any additional resources or suggestions, feel free to shout those out or add them to the note document. But if no one has a final thought, I'm going to call Robert and Judy back in.
I just wanted to add something around like career exploration. If there's another way to engage the students, a lot of the times like the students are into instant gratification or how is this affecting me now, and I really like the idea of the 9th grader setting that goal or kind of mapping their progress to get Cal Grant, because a lot of students are seeing the money that's attached to the progress that they're making and the grades that they're getting in their classes. So figuring out other ways, whether it's like setting a goal around the college you want to go to or the type of career you want and the different benchmarks that you need to make it or to make sure that you're meeting your goal might make it a little more realistic. And there's a California Career Zone has a really sort of nice website where it has a reality check of, and I can try to find the link to it, but the reality check kind of has them go through the process of what type of lifestyle they want and ultimately what type of salary they would need to lead that lifestyle, and that is kind of eye-opening. I've done it with a couple of different, mostly lower division students, and they're a little shocked usually at how much it would cost for them to live the way they want in the future. So,
great, thank you. And we're going to close with just a wondering from Sean in the G+ about the long-term viability of the program and how to transfer more kind of ownership and responsibility onto the students, so that if Robert and Judy got hit by a bus, hopefully that will never happen. Everything would still continue. What might that look like? All right. So on that note, let's go ahead and have Robert and Judy join us back into the conversation. And you guys have 3 minutes just to share anything that particularly resonated with you or any possible next steps or questions that have emerged.
I love how there's so much thought around this idea of building capacity among our students, because I think that is definitely central to making this a long-term thing. And I love this idea of thinking about shifting students' perceptions of math, and I think hearing a lot of these suggestions around, what are the concrete things that doing well in math will get them, I think is important. I think I spend a lot of time thinking about the intangibles, like the status of a young black man who finished calculus in high school and got an A. You know, that for me is sort of an intangible, but I think it's important to balance that with all of the, but this will get you these concrete things as well. So that's sort of what I'm left wondering about.
The resource suggestions were awesome. I definitely want to check out the Augustus Hawkins High School in that RISE program. We haven't done much mentor training, and we have another mentor program that I won't go into, but within this group we haven't done much mentor training beyond just get to know one another. And I feel like we probably should do some more training as if they're starting to build these relationships, then what's next? A lot of that's been happening kind of one-on-ones. Kids will say, "What am I supposed to talk about?" And I ask, "What have you been talking about?" But anyway, so the focus on mentor training that really struck me. I definitely want to check out David Connolly's work in college readiness to share with the students as well, and as well as to share with teachers, saying, "Hey, this is what this body of research says, and how are we doing in preparing kids this way?" I think it was Ben's comment, and someone else was coming on engaging families. I was just thinking about today. I was like, what if we got together and had, you know, some kind of evening dinner? Like, who would come, and who might, what students might step up and help organize that? I want to pursue that. And then thinking about scaling this up to, the hope is next year that the seniors take lead with the 9th graders, and that our current 10th graders, as they become 11th graders, they take lead with the 10th graders. And that, as someone mentioned, as these students are then graduating, those who stay at 3 or 4 of our local universities become mentors, really of the program, and then giving back to the program. And I was thinking a lot about that. Someone mentioned the family tree idea, and I wonder what the limits of our current advisory system are for building that kind of family tree in a group that meets already twice a week. If we go, yeah, we could have an advisory that's all boys of color, and there's advantages and definite disadvantages to that too. Just thinking of other ways of having more contact time within these groups.
Great. Okay, so this process would not be complete without a debrief, especially since this is our first time kind of engaging in this. And so this is our chance to kind of just think about this conversation and the protocol and how we experienced it. So at this point, we're kind of switching gears. We're no longer talking about Robert and Judy's work, but we're reflecting on the experience of the last hour. So I think Ben already kind of launched us a little bit with, like, what did we think of this question? Like, was it a helpful question for this kind of protocol or not? Did we stick to it? Anybody want to kind of get us started with debriefing? Maybe Ben, do you mind kind of getting us launched with this part?
Well, I think one thing I really appreciated about this conversation was the interaction from the folks who were not in the room. I think that happened better than it has in the past. I'm not sure if I know why that is, but it was kind of fun to see, you know, Sean, for example, and Rob, kind of surprise participants. I really actually liked that part quite a bit.
Don't forget Laura McBain. Hi, Laura.
Oh, Laura
I know you're
McBain.
watching.
Yeah, back from China. Wah wah.
And so maybe I'm just going to kind of go down the line right now, but feel free to pass, as always. Daisy or Steve, anything that struck you from the conversation or the particular protocol?
Make sure you unmute yourself, guys.
Yeah, we're muted. I think the big thing I'm curious about is if the comments and the questions are captured in the comments attached to the link, if we need the Google Doc as well for the extras. I guess my questions are around that piece there.
Okay, great. And Jen, if you have anything, go ahead and chat it in. Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm always amazed when anything works well electronically. It's not face to face, but it's not bad either.
Great. Jen wrote, I was not sure how to access the resources, the PowerPoints and folders, so it was a bit hard to follow. Thought the protocol and the question went well via Hangout. Great. So we can think about kind of how to make things a little more easy to access and shareable. Awesome. Michael, anything that struck you about this process or suggestions, tweaks for the future?
I liked the Google Doc because it was a place I could stage my upcoming contribution about the resources without throwing it into the chat prematurely. And I also didn't want to have no place to put it because then I was going to share it and then have to follow up with providing links and things. So I like that aspect of it, and I echo, I think, what Jennifer is saying. It would have been nice to be able to toggle between like the protocol, the focusing questions, the folder that we were referring to. That would have been helpful to me.
Great. How about Nick? If you have anything, go ahead and chat it in if your voice isn't working yet. And Scott, how about you?
Nick or me first?
I think Nick's tech is not quite working, so go ahead, Scott.
Okay. One thing I found useful is I got a double screen experience going. And it's kind of like The Walking Dead, where I can like have the video in front of me, but then over to the side I can have the review protocol, I can have the notes to write down on. So like you might see me over to the side, I'm like, doing that kind of stuff. But it's just kind of helpful having that. Might be a suggestion to make to people if they can have two screens, great.
Yeah, great. And Nick also requesting it would have been great to have been able to navigate back through the slides. Yes. Robert and Judy, most importantly, was this helpful to you?
Absolutely, for me, yeah, for sure. I just have a page of notes and a couple of key ideas that I want to pursue in the next couple of weeks. So thank you so much.
Yeah, same here. I feel like any chance to just kind of talk about things is so helpful, and just getting different perspectives and just, you know, questions that bring you in directions you hadn't even considered quite yet was really helpful. Great.
And Ryan, did you have something?
I just appreciate anytime there's a Walking Dead reference, so that's what I was just commenting on. So if we're debriefing, so I do appreciate that. No, I was also struck by how active our G+ community was, and it's great to hear those outside voices. I think we had 12 people that were watching today, guys. So yay, everybody!
Yeah. All right. And Gabby's back. Gabby, did you have anything in particular about the process that you wanted to share, or tweaks, suggestions for next time?
Sorry, I was just about to say that everything was great, and then my internet just cut out. So
I thought you were mad because I put two B's in your name, Gabby, and I was like, she must be really offended. I'm sorry.
I was like, I can't take this anymore. No, I thought it was great. I feel like it's very difficult for me to give feedback when I don't have like the slides in front of me. So I feel like in the future, just being able to access those, and there might have been a way and I just couldn't figure it out, but to be able to see the slides, to be able to go back and kind of engage more in asking more probing questions, I think having the slides or a way to kind of access them while we're discussing it would be useful.
Great. That is an awesome suggestion for the future. All right. And speaking of future, Ryan, if you don't mind going to the last slide. So next month, we're actually going to have our first all-team share-out. One of the things that people had requested after our launch event was that it would be really great, like it was great kind of connecting and hearing from our partner organization and learning a little bit about what they're thinking about and what they're planning on doing, but we really want to hear from everybody. So on December 10th, at the same time, we're going to have all team share-outs, and they're basically going to be 3-minute presentations by the team leads, although please feel free to, if there's a principal or a teacher or somebody in your organization who's helping as part of your team, can totally co-present. It's just kind of on you to put together the 3-minute presentation, and we've put folders or a template, basically a slide template, in each of your organizational folders. We'll share those again, but just updates on what we're learning about the problem that we want to tackle in our organization and in our schools, and what we're actually doing to get moving on it. So that will be next month, and then the month after that, we are very excited to have Gabby's team from Envision sharing their work in an improvement review. So we'll be using the same format to kind of dig into their work, and they'll pose a question for us, and as we move forward with these, please feel free to share the invitations widely. Gabby's is actually going to be at 4 o'clock to 5:15 so that her teachers can attend. And that's one of the questions I had as well for this group is is this a good time? Is it good to start from 3 to 4:15 like we did today, or should we be shifting it to 4 to 5:15 if we think that might help get more folks there? So if you have a strong preference one way or the other, please just shoot me an email after this and let me know, and we'll just kind of go with whatever works best for folks in the room, because we want you guys all to be there, and we would love to have some of your teachers and principals and people on your team join when they can. So, any last thoughts or questions? We're ending early. That never happens.
I do have one. I don't want to end early. No. The video, the playback on it, will this go out to every single person? Like, will Jennifer and like Yaramina and all the people on my team get this so they could look at it?
Yes. Yes, for sure. We've been taping it. We'll send it out to the whole team with, hey, here's what you missed. And they should be able to access the full recording. And we'll also send out the link to the notes so that if they have additional resources or ideas, they can continue to add those for Robert and Judy, which would be fantastic. All right. Well, if there's no final thoughts, we're all just going to leave with the image of the dog licking Scott's face right now. And call that a great Thursday afternoon. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for your thoughtful participation and questions. We'll see you in a little while. Coaching calls next week.